Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with George Ortega and David Joseph. And basically, our subject for today is how people are blamed for being fat. And so we could talk about this idea of fat crime, for example. You know how people blame people for their sexual orientation, or they might blame them for having a certain skin color. They might blame them for being tall or short. But we're realizing that people are not fundamentally responsible for anything, and that we like that's what our podcast is about. How we don't have free will. We don't really have a free choice in what happens because the way we are is really because of prior causes that made it that way, whether that's biological or environmental. And so, what I would like to start out this podcast is talk about like the nature versus nurture debate. And we know that things are really both nature and nurture. But let's talk about, for example, somebody who's naturally fat and somebody who's nurturally fat. Does that make sense so far?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I could give like some examples. Like, let's talk about the first type. Someone's naturally fat, meaning that their biology, their genetics, they are genetically determined to gain weight like really easy. They may not be eating more than other people. They may be eating the exact same diet as somebody else, but for whatever reason, their metabolism, something about their body type, they just get way fatter than somebody else, even with the exact same lifestyle. So that's a case that people are aware of where someone's genetically fat, and for them, it may be extremely difficult um, to lose weight. So that's one example. Another case is where it's not that they're necessarily genetically predisposed to gaining lots of weight, but perhaps the way they were raised, the way that they were taught to eat, their job, they may not get enough exercise at their job because there's a difference between your job being a firefighter, or in my case someone who walks around and lifts heavy objects at your job, and someone who has a desk job who has to sit somewhere for 8 hours every day at work. So there's environmental and societal effects on how much exercise you can get and what food will be available at those places. So I would say that the vast majority of people are nurturally fat, that it's not so much a genetic thing, but the lifestyle that they are forced into by prior causes, either because it's the way that they were taught to be and they don't know any other way, or just the circumstances they find themselves in. Like especially when you're a child, and you got to eat whatever your parents give you. You know what I'm saying? So that's an example how both of those things are things that compel somebody to be fat, but we cannot blame them for this. Now, can we? You guys still there?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Sorry, I hear you. But Chandler, yes, you're right. Basically, like back in the 50s, here in the United States, at least, probably throughout the world, uh, in the industrialized countries, people were slimmer. They weren't as overweight, and so that's just a clear, that's clear evidence that right, that our environment is responsible for the current weight problems people have, much more than their genetics or some kind of like genetic predisposition. So we have two messages. The first is like we really shouldn't blame people for being overweight, for not being able to lose weight, from the free will perspective, because nobody has a free will. It's really not fundamentally up to us whether we're slim or not. And but from this perspective of, yes, since it is kind of like environmental, we have a society now that's far more sedentary. We have these food commercials just tempting us all the time with these foods and stuff. That their companies, they hire advertising companies to just, to spend a lot of time, a lot of money to just induce us to eat more and more. So like we have a lot that we're up against, and it's really it helps those people who are like overweight and trying to lose weight to just feel better about themselves, to the extent that they don't blame themselves. I think then maybe they can succeed more at feeling happier and like better about themselves, and that I think would help them to lose weight.
Yeah. It's very interesting because what's cool about it is that we know it's not up to anybody. But we can definitely help people who are trying to lose weight, at a certain extent. And there's so much information available, and that's what's great about it. But yeah, like you said, our society is more sedentary, that there's a certain way people live, and I think this largely explains why there's more fat people in one country than another. And you can look at the differences between those two places and you can figure it out. And for example, there are people who really hate fat people. They are, they judge them and blame them. And in a certain sense, they are blaming those people. They are attributing a free will to them. Um, and it's kind of interesting because there's the issue that there's two sides of this. Like, for example, first of all, a free will, even if such a thing did exist, doesn't necessarily give you the full power over your genetics, and your environment anyway. So there still is a question of, do these people have the freedom to act on the desire to lose weight? If you get what I'm saying, like, does this person, do they have a job and earn money and buy their own food, or are they living in jail, or in a or just in some homeless shelter, or living with some family, and they have to eat whatever they're given? And so there's about, do people, even though they want to, do they have the freedom of action in order to take the steps needed to do so? What do you think?
All right. Well, basically, relative to the theme of free will, obviously, they don't have a free will to fundamentally change their behaviors. But yes, in other words, like just like with morality, we constantly teach on this podcast that understanding that we don't have a free will doesn't give us license to just do whatever we want. We still have to, like, uphold morality, do the right thing, because actions have consequences, positive and negative. So the same applies to people who are overweight. I mean, and so basically, yeah. So like, in other words, like they don't blame themselves, but if they want a better lifestyle, they want to be healthier, then it just makes a lot of sense to try to not eat too much, to try to lose weight, try to exercise and all. But again, just because this is a podcast about free will, I think it's very important that we use this example to demonstrate to people, if we had a free will, who among us would choose to be overweight? Who among us would choose to eat more than is healthy for them, more than they really want to eat? This is a perfect example, that I think a lot of people can relate to, that explains really powerfully why we don't have a free will. Just a great example of this.
Yeah. And what's so interesting about it is, when you live in a country where the majority of people, or I'm not sure if it's the majority, but I think I heard something like 2/3 of Americans are like obese or something. And yet you everywhere, you hear and see people who are trying to lose weight. They're asking for advice, they're buying books on it, they're trying to do so. It's not a case. It's very interesting. People are trying, but for some reason there's something wrong, that prevents them from achieving this, and that's not up to them either. It's not their fault that they don't know how to lose weight, or they don't have the resources to do it. And you know what's really bad about it, guys? And here's what really gets me upset, is that there's so many weight loss products, so many companies advertising, oh, take this pill, or do this thing, and you'll lose 50 pounds in 5 days, and crazy stuff like that that's advertised to people. And a lot of people believe it because they're just so desperate, and it makes me kind of sad.
Well, I would ask, why are they so desperate as well? I mean, I've been in conversations with people about this before, and when I give them the free will problem, they usually come back with, "Oh, you're just making excuses. You're just trying to shift the blame away from you, and you're just trying to justify being fat or obese." And they can't seem to grasp that, that there's no free will, so you can't really blame the person for being fat. I mean, it's not like fat people want to be fat. They want to eat certain foods, and being fat is like a byproduct of eating those foods. So I don't think people really understand that. As simple as it sounds, it's quite scary.
Yeah, it's actually very simple. And here's the deal. We're not shifting the blame anyway, because we're not really blaming anybody. It's like, for example, I understand that nobody is really to take blame or credit for anything, because nothing's fundamentally up to them. So we're not, just as we're not blaming people for being fat, we're also not blaming people who are knowingly or unknowingly making other people fat and deceiving people in ways that make them fat. So as long as everyone understands, we're not blaming anybody. We're just trying to explain, how things are actually working. I think they'll be more receptive to what we're saying.
Guys, I think we're on to a very powerful message. We've been trying for weeks, for months, to come up with a message that we think will resonate with people to get them to understand this. So, right, like if here in the United States, 2/3 of Americans are overweight, and they start trying to like tell us that they have a free will, that we have a free will, that we're just trying to use it for as an excuse to get away with things. All we have to do is turn it around. Then basically, if we start to blame them for being overweight, if that's what they're suggesting, then I think they'll understand. They'll understand that, oh no, it's not that easy. And if it was that easy, that they wouldn't be overweight. So again, I think this is a powerful message to get a lot of people on our side. To get, because the reason people don't want to accept that we don't have a free will is because like they believe that having a free will, thinking they have a free will, makes them feel better, and apparently makes them feel better. But even though it's mistaken, but to the extent that we introduce this message to them, listen, especially to the people who are overweight, you know, are you telling me that you're freely willing to be overweight? Are you telling me that you're freely willing to not, to just to eat too much and to not exercise and all? I think for most people, like, and some people will say, well, no, in my case, it's genetic. It's like I was born and, this genetic predisposition to be overweight and all. But then we can just cite the statistics that actually, the genetic component of obesity or overweightness is just not a very significant, percentage. We can cite the history. So I think we're just on to a very, very effective message. I think we should probably do podcast after podcast after podcast about this to get people tuned in to that. It's a very, very powerful and clear indication that we don't have a free will, that people who are overweight have a strong motivation to agree with.
Yeah, and this is I agree, because this is very important, because the message we're actually saying is we're saying that just as a lot of people will admit that somebody's not responsible for the genetic components that make them have a condition where they gain weight extremely easy, we're saying that people are also not to blame for the environmental factors, the other factors of nurture and all the things in society that cause people to not be able to lose weight. So, yeah, we're saying that they're not to blame for either, rather than making a distinction between the people who can be blamed for their fat and those who can't be. We're saying that there really is no distinction.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there is like a popular trend towards fat shaming, almost, it seems, especially on popular websites like YouTube and whatnot. There seems to be a lot of people coming forward just to shame people for the sake of shaming people, almost. And they're using the argument that what we're trying to say is just an excuse. It's like they can't tell the difference between a reason and an excuse.
Yeah, and you know what? Here's a kind of an interesting thought, guys. Let's suppose that it became illegal to be fat. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that there was a law such that you go to jail if you are a certain level of fatness? Yeah, I mean, just imagine that. Now, if that was the case, don't you think there would still be people who would be lawbreakers through no fault of their own?
I
That would
think,
be a good way. Go ahead, David.
yeah, I was just going to say, I think I would be. Yeah, I'd be in jail right now.
All right,
Oh,
but here's the thing. But David, you were I think you're keying in us in on something that's very important. In other words, like we did an episode maybe 3 weeks ago on blaming gays for being gay. That there's a lot of hatred toward gays. So there's a lot of kind of like there's a lot of prejudice, a lot of blaming, a lot of shaming that happens toward people that are overweight. And so this we can like our message can be kind of like a social justice thing. In other words, it's just wrong. And so like in other words, like if we promote this message in terms of like the wrongness of shaming people for something that's not in their control, that will be a powerful premise for them to make that next logical step of understanding the wait a minute, it's not in their control because they don't have a free will. Now, while we're making this message, of course, we got to be careful to to say it in the right way. In other words, like we don't want people who are overweight to conclude, to wrongly conclude that since it's not up to them, since they don't have a free will, there's no way they can lose weight. We still want to say, listen, you can lose weight, but for example, like self-esteem, I think sometimes maybe one of the factors um, around weight gain or maintaining weight is maybe many people don't feel as good about themselves as they should. And maybe they're blaming themselves for overeating and all that, which compounds it, makes it a lot worse. So, to the extent that we deliver the message to people that are overweight, listen, it's not your fault. Don't blame yourself. Maybe even that step of like of showing them that they're innocent, that they're just giving them this absolution on this might allow them to just take this burden off them, feel better, and then summon up the energy to eat less or exercise or do what they would otherwise do.
right. Yeah, and so it actually might actually help them because if they feel like they deserve to be fat, won't that kind of hinder them from losing weight and taking steps? Because if they feel like they somehow deserve it, well, then it makes them just kind of accept it, and then you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. It's like being fat for them is their punishment for overeating, which they're blaming them for themselves about. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's important to make the distinction between determinism and fatalism.
That's a good
like
one.
like seriously guys, go with me on this little thought experiment. Okay, now under fatalism, the gods have predetermined, the gods have willed that you will be fat no matter what you do. So that's fatalism. Fatalism, obviously similar to fatalism here, is where regardless of causality or acausality, something is fated, or in this case fatted, to be a certain way. And so under fatalism, it means if the gods will you to be fat, you will always be fat. And if the gods will you to be thin, you'll always be thin. And that what you eat or exercise makes no difference under fatalism. But under determinism, where everything that happens causally, then yes, you can gain or lose weight depending on what you do. And through a process of trial and error and learning from other people, you can make efforts towards your weight loss goals.
Right. I've come across the ideas that people put across on the forums, and it's generally a case they think that if they just keep bombarding people with lists of what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat, somehow that's going to fix the problem. But I think the problem can often go deeper than that. It's more of an emotional problem, or a mental illness of some kind.
All right, so dude, I think we've really hit on a very powerful message because, like, in terms of, like, for example, the governments across the world, obesity, overweightness is expensive. There's in terms of treatments and all, and this illness and all. Basically, they have an incentive to address this. This to the extent that we introduce, people's being overweight as our not having free will, then those of us who are overweight are going to be saying, wait a minute, like, if it was up to us, we'd lose the weight, we'd be much thinner. And then the very thin people are saying, no, it's up to you because look at me, because like I'm thin and stuff. So you have like 2/3 of the population, basically now in a kind of competition with the 1/3 who are kind of like defending free will. And Chandler, I think we want to kind of like really go with this. See if like maybe send Trick a link to this podcast, this episode. See if he'll write a blog post on this. We should definitely follow up. We should like pound this. In other words, when I was like um, first promoting this idea we don't have free will, I mean, what I did is like just get the message out there, repeat the message over and over and over, like with the cause and effect and all. I think we need to do this. I think this is finally the kind of message that at first we were thinking that like the defending gays and all in that sense was a good message, but unfortunately only 1 out of 10 people are gay, whatever, and that seems high, whatever. But with overweight people, 2/3 of Americans, I mean that's a great way of getting people on our side. And so like, and that gets them to understand, fine, we don't have a free will, but that doesn't mean that everything is fatalist, that everything is like destiny. They can
I
still
love it.
lose the weight.
I love it. I love that example of fatalist. Fatalist.
Right. So Chandler, I mean, here's the thing. Like, so this is your opportunity actually also to make a very powerful original contribution to this whole free will debate that could be a game changer. So I would encourage you also on your own to upload episode after episode of your own stuff, just explaining this concept in more detail, just promoting it, just getting people to see the free will versus no free will question through this perspective of overweightness. It's something that people can so powerfully relate to, and it's very important to them.
Yes, it's actually a very interesting thing. Yeah, there's it's a very great example because most of the time when we're talking about the free will topic, we're talking about it in terms of morally blaming people for things like for what they do that's immoral or illegal or something. But in this case, like, while I don't actually view being fat as a crime, many people treat it as if it is a crime, as if it's some kind of a sin, you know? And so, because people do blame people for being fat, see, I've seen a lot of videos about fat shaming, and so that was sort of what led to this idea, and I just got really inspired to bring up that topic, and I'm so glad I did, because this has been a really great episode. So yeah, it would be awesome if Trick could write more about this, and I think I already kind of know what video description I'm gonna type up for, well, video or podcast description, because I write the descriptions for both archive.org when I upload them and when I upload them to YouTube. So yeah, I definitely want to promote this idea and get people talking about it, because this is a way of attaching a very important issue to the free will topic, but one that's not as emotional, like it's not as difficult as climate change or or stuff like that that people go into denial about. Instead, people should be receptive to this message because we're basically telling them it's not your fault you're fat.
Okay, excellent. So Chandler, yeah, you came up with this idea, and it's you deserve the credit. Nobody has a free will, but you still deserve the credit for coming up with it. You want to champion it. In addition to like emailing Trick to have him do a blog post about it, you want to email our whole group. Just explain that we're going to start focusing on this a lot. This is going to be our message. And Chandler, like you've got you have several written blogs, right, that you can write on. So write about this. You might even want to consider publishing a small book on it. But this is, I think, again, we've been searching for years, for several years, on a message that will resonate with people. I can't think of a more powerful message. This climate change thing, fine. It's something that should resonate, but it's not. But the overweightness, especially in terms of healthcare costs here in the United States are like exploding. And so like this is something that will not only get people, involved on a personal level, will get government involved, but Chandler, I want you to take the lead in this. Again, you introduced it. It's your it's your brainstorm, and you want to go with it. Part of what we're trying to do is like for example, I and Nick and me, in terms of like the meetup in 2010 that got this whole topic out of academia into the public, right? But then people like Sam Harris. Sam Harris has been doing a decent job on this. I mean, publishing the book and all. But we really don't want them to take credit, for actually what we're doing or have done and all. So, I think you want to kind of like just position yourself so you're the person who's pioneering this association. There are, in addition to your blog post, and again, I don't want to be, for you to become overly ambitious about this if it doesn't feel comfortable. I mean, it doesn't have to be done immediately, it doesn't have to be overnight, but like, for example, there are other kinds of like, there's, I think, news stories, news magazines on, the internet, that if you submitted a story to them, or you can even self-submit it and just have it published without it being accepted and all, then you want to try to get this across the internet. So that every night I pretty much scour the videos and the text posts on Free Will to see what's happening. And so, like, I would guarantee that if you start doing this, if we start doing this, within several weeks, we're gonna find that many other people are gonna start writing about this. I really, guys, I think this is a message that we've been waiting for. That we need to now just expand it and amplify it, so that the other writers on Free Will, understand its significance, and so that it just brings people to this issue of free will in a way that is much more difficult to ignore, that they understand the relevance of it.
That's a great, I really agree, George, because basically, we've done this with other topics. We've done this with abortion. We've done this with climate change. We've done this with other topics like sexuality, which we've covered on. But I think that this is something that definitely needs to be revisited. So what I might do is, I might look at, what are the news articles that are coming out related to obesity and weight loss, and comment on those, and explain this to some people, and really become sort of an activist about that topic, on top of the usual stuff. But I think this is good. So we'll want to revisit this, and I'll probably email the co-hosts about this, because it's just a great idea. We covered so much just in this short episode we've done.
Well, Chandler, I've got an idea. When I published my book, Climate Rescue Capitalism, about like creating products, and basically, if they're in the supermarkets, will people buy products whose profits are going to like fund the fight against climate change? I did a survey. I asked about 50 people in White Plains, whether they buy these products, and 42 people said yes. It was pretty effective means. If on your job, I don't know if on your job, whatever, but like, you might want to create a survey that kind of like asks people, do people, and even ask people who are visibly overweight, do you believe you have the free will to lose all that weight or something? I mean, that, we got to come up with the right question. But if we can get some data to support this, that when you frame the free will question within the perspective of the weight, issue problem, people get it, so that might be a powerful game changer in this.
Yeah, and there's something that the benefits of this are so immense, because people will be simultaneously learning about the causes that lead to weight gain, and it will help them lose weight, while at the same time we're also removing this blame and shame that's been placed on them. So it's a win-win. We're winning in two areas. It's perfect.
All right, Chandler, this is like, you want to pioneer this, you want to champion this, you want to lead this. We'll all help you. David will help you. I'll help you kind of like craft your message and all. We'll help you amplify it and all. But I think we finally have our message. Again, I just have a strong intuition about this. Now we got to do the work to see, how do we craft this? Because if we can get people who are overweight to understand it's not really up to them, what they're really saying is that they don't have a free will, and this, so we got to go with this. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is great, and I'm inspired about this topic. So I want to pursue this for a while. So thanks for the suggestion about that, because this is great.
Well, I was just going to say, so we're going for the no free will diet.
Yeah, no free will diet. Yeah.
David, that's awesome. That's awesome. I'm very sincere, man. That's excellent. That's excellent, because in other words, like, people people overeat because they don't feel good about themselves. They don't feel good about themselves because they're blaming themselves. They're blaming themselves because they believe they have a free will. David, that's powerful.
Dude, should I use that? Should I use that as the title for this episode? The No Free Will Diet?
Sounds good. And David, I think, like, I don't know if you're interested in writing blog posts, but you might want to title your blog post with that same thing and explain our premise. Absolutely. You just attribute it to Chandler. I'm gonna get this Chandler Klebs has come up with this brilliant strategy for getting people to understand the free will delusion and just describe it and just attribute the no free will diet to yourself, of course, because you coined it and all. But absolutely, absolutely.
Even though everyone knows I really attribute it to the universe. Okay, well, I guess I should end this one then, because that sounds absolutely great. Okay, you've been listening to Free Will, Science, and Religion with Chandler Klebs, George Ortega, and David Joseph, and we've talked about why some of the reasons why people are fat and why it's not their fault, and we're going to be revisiting this topic for some time. So, I hope you've enjoyed, and come back for more.